I realize I'm not helping the world be a better place if I'm judging them or resenting them without having an actual conversation and saying, hey, are you concerned about climate change? What do you think about the next car you get? Maybe getting a hybrid. Those are the conversations we need to be having more.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 171 of the Running For Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. And if this is your first episode, if you are a big Clare Gallagher fan, or a big Planet of Ours fan, I should say, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. This is great to have you, and I hope you become a lifelong listener. So last week we had Jay DeSherry on the show, who's considered one of the best physical therapists in the country. He's definitely one of the leaders when it comes to what we should be working on, things that we should be thinking about. He really is someone that a lot of physical therapists, a lot of experts look to for kind of what they should be doing. And last week he was here to talk about feet in particular, how we've been neglecting them, how critical they are to us staying healthy and to us running well. And no, unfortunately, it's not just as simple as getting the right pair of shoes. So that one was a really insightful episode, and I really recommend you go back and listen to that one if you have not already. Now, on to today. I do have Clare Gallagher on the show, who actually won Western States a few days, I think, after we released the previous episode that I did with her. So it was really exciting to see her do so well. And, you know, she's had some ups and downs, but she has come back since we last recorded and done quite a lot. However, as those of you who know and follow Clare know, she is very passionate about our planet, about environment, about climate change. And this episode is not really about her running. We will talk about it right at the end. But this episode is about the environment, about climate change. Now, I know that that's going to get me some angry messages, probably some people, yelling at me, to be honest. And yeah, that is a little bit scary, that I know I'm going to annoy some of you, and I know that you want me to just stick to running, and I will. I promise you, for the most part, I do, and I will, and I still love to talk about running things. However, you know, Clare Gallagher spoke a few weeks ago, a month ago maybe, about standing up for yourself, standing up for things that really matter to you, the things that matter the most. And what matters to me is this, talking about the environment, making sure we actually are doing something about this, because we cannot continue the way that we are. Even if technology somehow manages to save us, we do have to change our ways. So I just want to give you a warning that this is going to be about environmental issues. I know that there's many of you out there who want to help. You genuinely want to do better, but you're not sure how. And this episode covers how and why, because last time when Clare came on the show, she did talk a lot about, how important it is to vote. And I get that. But also, myself personally, you'll hear me ask in this episode, it's not so easy to go volunteer. Maybe you have some extra money you could donate, but you don't necessarily have the time that you could give up, or, voting doesn't happen that often. So, and you're not the kind of person to get involved with legislature, can't say that word. You know what I mean? But you want to do something. You want to do what you can to raise your family, your future into, a safe place that is doing well. So I know that's frustrating, and that's why I tried to make this an actionable episode, things that we can do. We've given you plenty of ideas. We kind of brainstorm about that. If you want to skip ahead to next week, go ahead, but please consider listening. It may make you think differently. And again, I know this is going to frustrate some of you. I know that it's not about running, and I don't even know if I can apologize, to be honest, because I feel like this is just so important to me that it's worth it, because this is something I believe in. Clara talked about it. We hear it all the time. I say it to you guys. The things that matter the most to you, you've got to stand up for yourself with them, even if it gets some people to be annoyed at you. I'm learning that I'm never going to keep everyone happy. So I hope you can understand why I did this. This is a one-off. This isn't going to be every week. This is one that I can send people to again and again. However, because I know this is a heavy topic, I've limited my ads today to just one. So we will hear from Recoup in just a moment, but then we go on to meet Claire and you won't hear anything else. We're just going to focus on the conversation that we have. And all the links that we talk about today, you can find at tinamuir.com/episode 171. So let's go thank Recoup and go meet Claire. Thank you to Recoup for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Now, you've heard me talking about Recoup for the past few weeks, maybe a month, and I am absolutely loving it. I mean, I just wish that I would have had this when I was in college, when I was going through my elite career. There would have been so many times I would have used it. So let me tell you a bit more about it before I keep talking about just how much I would have gone back in time to have one of these. But they have a cryosphere and a cryo sleeve. Now, both of these are cold products. However, they are launching some thermo sleeves, which are going to be warm products in March 2020. So these hot and cold sleeves and this hot and cold kind of ball that sits in a holder are used to kind of reduce inflammation. They're going to help with recovery. And I know that it's always going to be best for us to go to a physical therapist, to speak to someone to really figure out what the problem is. And yes, that is always what I tell people. You know that more than anyone, that I am not going to tell you which shoes you should wear, which specific model. I mean, like, this shoe is the best, because I don't believe in that. I'm not going to tell you which injury you have, because it doesn't work like that. We have to go see people. We have to figure out what the source is. Just because your knee hurts doesn't mean that it is necessarily the source is your knee. It could be coming from anywhere else. So I'm all about going to see experts. However, I do realize in many situations we are kind of stuck. You know, maybe you're a week out from your race and you've got some shin issues. Shin splints especially like to hit us hard when we are coming into that taper time. We're starting to panic. And that is where Recoup comes in. This is so handy, having these sleeves that are going to give you an hour of cold compress that's going to be able to reduce that inflammation and help you. And then the Sphere, which is a portable cold massage roller, which combines ice and massage. It stays cold for 6 hours, so you can have this relief on the go. You can use it multiple times. It's basically an ice cup replacement, so it's mess-free, easily cleanable, time-saving. The Sphere comes out of the handle so that you can use it on the bottom of your feet if you're struggling with plantar fasciitis, or even, you know, in certain IT band situations. This is used by many professional athletes, and it really has been something that I've been really impressed with what they've been able to make here. As I said, the sleeve is also helpful. It's going to give you 1 hour of relief. And they also are coming up with ankle and shoulder ones later in 2020. So I'm just really excited about what they are offering here. I think it could help so many people. And if you use code TinaMuir, you can get 15% off your order at recoupfitness.com. That's RECOUP fitness.com, recoupfitness.com. If you use code TinaMuir, you will get 15% off your order. Go do it. Claire, thank you so much for coming back on the Running for Real podcast. Now, I usually do not repeat my guests for at least a year, if not longer. But with you and your topic and just this being so important, I'm breaking my rule for you. You already know a different rule that I've broken for you. But I'm excited to have you back on here. So thank you so much for your time and just for coming to share your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to have broken your rules.
Yes. This is only 6 months, I think, just over since the last one. So it hasn't been very long. However, a few weeks after we did record, I timed that perfectly. Or it might have even been the week it came out, I think. You won Western States, which was a huge win. And we will talk a little bit about your running towards the end. So those who are diehard Clare fans, you can hear more about that towards the end. But I really want this episode to be for runners in a different way. You know, everyone here listening, we love to run, and we know we want to continue running for as long as we possibly can. And maybe you envision a life where you have children who run or grandchildren who run, if they want to, obviously. And we know runners care. We know runners are genuine and they're just good people. But this is a time when we really have to do something. And I really feel passionately that our population as runners can be leading the charge here, which is why I want to be getting Claire on the show here. You know, runners are good at standing up for themselves, especially this last year. We've come a long way in kind of speaking up and standing up for what we believe in. And for both Claire and I, the number one thing, as I said in the last interview, it should be the number one thing for every single person listening, is to figure out climate change, to help look after our planet, to get ourselves back to a place where we are thinking about our future, not just the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years, but literally thousands of years in the future. So Claire, tell us firstly, what has changed since 2019? Like, was 2019 generally a good year for kind of moving things in the right direction, or was it not what we expected or hoped it would be?
In terms of global climate change?
Yeah, just like, starting to see a difference happening here.
Well, I mean, scientifically, and I'm speaking in like very broad strokes. It was horrible. Every year that's passed really in this century has been almost the hottest year on record. It was again this year. We used the Earth's natural resources up earlier than ever before. We know that we're consuming more than our Earth can provide. And that's like very broad global strokes. Specifically in the US, we had, again, a really awful year thanks to our administration, the Trump administration, that is rolling back environmental laws and regulations that are
When you say rolling them back, just explain, what does that mean?
It means our environmental protection agency, the Department of Interior, these agencies that are appointed by basically President Trump. A lot of them are in cahoots with the oil and gas industry, and they are making our laws less strict in order to favor oil and gas industries to make more profit. And who's the victim in this situation? It's every single person on this planet. It's you, it's me, it's those people's families, it's our families, it's our lungs. Yeah, it's pretty horrible, to be honest. And if we're not laughing, we'd be crying. So we have to find ways to use action over apathy and use these very depressing statistics into mobilizing to waking up in the morning feeling like you actually can do something about this.
And how about that aspect? I mean, surely with people like Greta Thunberg kind of winning or getting Time Magazine's Person of the Year, kind of seeing things like Extinction Rebellion really kind of gathering steam, moving around, and, these climate strikes happening, has that part of it kind of gone in a good direction in 2019? My opinion is 100%. I feel like the community of people who care about Earth is growing exponentially. It's really, really exciting. And I think amongst runners, it's more palpable. I don't think that we've always lacked people who care about Earth. I genuinely think the running community does care about our lung health and about open spaces and about a beautiful planet. But I've found people to be more vocal about it in the last year, thanks to people and the media attention increasing, and not just on Greta, but on Indigenous youth leaders and Indigenous-led fights, which is a lot of climate justice. Yeah, I'm inspired. So you are feeling more hopeful than you were this time a year ago?
I don't know if hope is the right word. I guess I do have hope, but I'm feeling like I'm part of a very supported crew of people who want to make the world a better place. I also feel like 2020 is possibly the most important year for our planet when we look at the U.S. presidential election.
Yeah. And
it sounds kind of like self-righteous to be like, oh, only the U.S. president matters, but that's not true. That's not the only thing that matters. Local government election matters, senators, reps, presidents across the world. That all really matters. And in the U.S., 2020 is a very big year.
But I mean, I don't know how much you know of these stats, but I remember my dad telling me maybe a month or two ago that part of the numbers that had come out were that the UK was doing, a much better job at kind of reducing their emissions, as were many other countries. And I think Europe as a whole, from what I remember, I wish I'd kind of asked him to remind me of what he said. But so, you say about the US elections, and I know most of my listeners are US, but there's also people around the world.
Right.
But I think the people around the world also know that US right now kind of holds the card to decide kind of a lot of what happens moving forward. So I see that is important. And, as you mentioned, it is an election year. It's impossible for this not to be political. However, I've already told you, Claire, that I don't want this to become just an episode where we talk about politics. And I realize that most people listening, you probably already are going to go out and vote, and you are going to do your part to make a change through your vote and through the things that you can do this year, especially in 2020. However, I want to get through to listeners who are still a bit skeptical about how all this climate change stuff still applies. How bad are we talking here? Because, I mentioned this in the last episode, but once, and you know this for sure, like once you get it in your head and you really start thinking, so to those of you listening, you think about your children and your children's children, like what kind of world they are living in. Think about it logistically, how much trash you throw out of your house in 1 week, and then multiply that by 52 weeks and multiply that by every year, and how much of that takes 1,000 years to degrade. Or, recycling, they throw out so much of it because it's contaminated. If it's got even the slightest bit of food in it, they will often throw out the whole thing, the whole container of whatever it is. And so, just sit and think about for a minute about actually your impact, all those things you purchase, all that extra stuff we have, all these things that we do. So I want to encourage people to really think this through. But for those listening, just to really drill it in, what are some of the impacts that will affect our world? Because maybe there are people living near the coast. They say, okay, we might have flooding. Maybe there are people who live in drier areas. They know they're getting more forest fires, but people might not think that, with that flooding might bring, it knocks out a sewage plant, and that sewage plant brings disease. That disease is carried by mosquitoes, and it takes it all over the country, all over the world. So you may think, I live in St. Louis, I'm safe. Not necessarily, so tell us about some of the impacts that people might not be thinking about that actually bring home how serious this actually could be.
Yeah, it's a very broad question, and location obviously really matters. But one thing that I've talked about before, and it's not like it's not the sexiest topic, but it's air pollution. And I don't care where you live, every single person is impacted by air pollution. And the main culprits of bad air pollution are industries. So oil and gas wells, fracking wells. And the more I've read about it, because I live in Boulder, Colorado, it's considered part of the Front Range of Colorado. So it's included in Denver and sort of the plains. Our air pollution is increasingly worse every year. We're just downgraded by the EPA to a serious violation. Our ground level ozone is so bad. And this is something that millions and millions of people are being impacted by, and it's insidious. You don't see it every day, but it's impacting our lungs. And we have kids in North Denver who are living next to schools that have a well 500 feet from them. And it's been proven that like benzene is an air pollutant that can cause like crazy health impacts, from like lowering IQ to asthma, to all the above. And that's just one tiny pollutant. And there are so many floating around, slowly impacting us. And if we're lucky enough to not have asthma, which I am, fine. But it's shown that our genetics are changing if we're in this polluted air. And so that's another thing to think about with your kids or our children, our future generations is, in some cases, we're literally making ourselves like stupider because we're allowing these industries to pollute at such an outrageous level.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even if you think about the thing that you love, the reason you're listening to this podcast is running.
It's running,
and
right.
If the air quality, as we see again and again, there's forest fires in Australia as we speak. There's been a lot more in the US this year, which has kept people inside, not being able to run outside. There's going to be more and more of that. So, you mentioned about Colorado as well. Eventually, maybe it gets to a place where we can't even go outside and run, and your children and your children's children, they certainly wouldn't be able to go and spend an hour or two outside breathing in that air. So,
right.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of extreme and I've said this before, it's like, okay, if you are okay running on a treadmill inside for the rest of your life, then fine, you can sit this fight out.
You deserve a medal as well, because I don't even know how that's possible.
Right. And I encourage runners that truly think about it. It's like, my run is the most sacred part of my day. It's what keeps me going. It's the reason why I like being on earth. One of them, one of the biggest ones. And I don't think people are really thinking about how close that potential scenario is. And for many people, way less privileged than myself, like people in North Denver, or a lot of bad air pollutants gets moved up to Alaska via jet streams and things, or, large cities across the world. They don't have the option to run outside in healthy air. So the time is now. We can't, I live in Boulder, Colorado, one of the most privileged places in the US. And I still I'm checking my air quality every day. And this last year has been gross.
Yeah.
If I had asthma, I would have to plan my day totally different based on the ozone levels. And even still, I should do it because I know it's best to plan around that. And that's not something that we should have to live with, because there are people making these decisions and profiting off of them at the expense of our health.
For sure. And then even, to go along with that, people say, well, the temperature rises, so what? What's a couple degrees? Not even going into all the catastrophic things that are knock-on effects. But if you even think about the temperature, the amount of us that complain in the summer of how hot and how brutal it is, well, going into the future, we're going to get to a place where you physically cannot go outside to run or even be outside in general, because it will be kind of life-threatening to be outside. We'll have more record highs, more record days of highs, which, we all know, or I'm sure most of us have spent some time in Florida. I know there are some of you in Florida, which Florida is its own other case with its risks there, but it can be brutal. And, that's something else to think about, that it's not just the fact of the temperature going up, but it could in many places reach where it's dangerous to even be outside in that kind of heat. So this is what I wanted to bring home, just more kind of making us think about actually the impacts here. And, now we can kind of go on to some other things that that we can do to help here. So, you and I talk about cleaning up the planet. We need to look after our home, all these things like this. We know it's a big year for voting, important to put your vote down. But what else can someone do? If someone is really kind of feeling that, sinking feeling in their stomach of oh yeah, this is real, what can I do? Let's start kind of bigger. If people want to get involved in movements and in signing petitions and things like that, where's the best place to go for that?
Yeah, I think the first step for any person trying to add more environmental practices into their everyday life is to educate ourselves as much as possible. So signing up for the New York Times climate newsletter. It's a once a week newsletter with the climate news. That's high level, broad news, but also following your local news outlets and energy and environment scene, whether it's on Twitter or wherever you get your news. Finding what's happening around you is I think more important than joining a global movement, just because all politics is local, all harms are local. And when you see what's happening in your backyard, I've found that's what's really motivated me to then think bigger. So, the phrase, think global, act local, that's been around since I think Earth Day was created in 1980 or 1970. I can't remember. So educate ourselves, find out which of your local city council members are pushing renewable energy in your town or in your state. Because the great thing is, as we're like talking about this horrible predicament we're in, and especially in the Southeast and Southwest, where summer temperatures are so terrifying. I don't know how you guys do it. You know, you have to run at 5 a.m. already, and soon 3 a.m. will still be too hot. The reality is we have enough renewable resources in these places to make our world livable. There is enough solar energy to be harnessed in the Southeast and Southwest that all of our air conditioning could run on solar energy. And in order to do that, we have to figure out who's in charge locally and start putting their names down on our fridge and follow what they're doing, call your friends. And again, sorry, that's going towards more of the election cycle.
Let me pause you on that. How do you know with that if someone is actually meaning it? You know, it's quite a kind of a buzzword right now. Like, how do we know? What are some signs to look for in that aspect of it, that someone is saying it, not just adding it to their list that they think will be effective?
100%. If they're already in office, look at their voting record. Everything of a public official is public record. And there are news outlets that are covering this. And I found I wasn't really reading them because I was consuming a lot of media that I just found to be interesting. And then I realized, wow, I am not even putting my head in my local news media, you know, and I'm talking like good journalism, you know, not just watching the nightly news. And it takes a little bit of time and wiggling around to see where people have voted in the past. It's pretty obvious. I think it's someone who says they're a proponent of renewable energy. I don't think is going to vote against it, at least from my experience looking at elected officials across the country. Most people are honest because of movements like Sunrise Movement that are really holding elected officials to the fire. You know, like Joe Biden is not. He says, "Yeah, I support, you know, renewable energy," but the reality is he's still taking money from fossil fuel companies, and so that's all. It's all out there. So I think that's number one. Is like just read more. Follow news that is actually informative. Follow people on, if you're on Twitter, you know, our energy and environment news, things like that. And then the day-to-day, which I'm guessing you want to talk about more, Tina, because...
Well, let's, before we get into that, I know you know what I want to bring up here, but... You know, you mentioned a few weeks ago about, you know, groups in your area. There may be, you know, people cleaning up trails, doing environmental work, particularly groups of runners. You know, what would someone type on Facebook, on Google to see what is in their area? Like, can you give us some words, people? Because, you know, I'm trying to like put myself in the mind of people who are listening, yes. And it's hard to know how to find them. You know, do you type recycling? Do you type environmental? Do you type, what would be some words people could use to find someone in their area?
Yes. If you're trying to find a running group that does this, I think something like trail work is a good place to start because that's a very common traditional outlet where people doing trail work are usually a little more in tune to the environmental scenes, but that's not the same as climate advocacy work. I would type in things like climate advocacy, literally climate change in my area, and using a group or there's a platform called Patagonia Action Works, and it has thousands and thousands of small nonprofits that Patagonia gives money to. You can type in where you live and you can see what nonprofits are around you. And that has nothing to do with running, but doing that will show, wow, there are so many nonprofits working on, you know, whether it's like bee pollination, or, you know, encourage keeping the bees alive so we can eat food, to actual lobbying at state levels, to trail work, to recycling, And everyone's going to find their niche because it's such a broad scope. We need redundancy in all of those areas. We need groups, honestly, doing similar things. And groups that are doing the exact same things will end up dying out. But on the whole, like, groups exist. One that has been really inspiring to me. So I have a friend in Ventura, which is Southern California. His name's Vic. And he was like, hey, I'm just so confused why runners aren't doing more. You know, it's basically conversations we've had before. And he started his own nonprofit called Runners for Public Lands. And he has a vibrant running group in Ventura showing up to runs, to trail work events, to beach cleanups. And now they're getting more into the climate world, you know, they're getting advice from locals, like people at Patagonia. And it's so inspiring because all it takes is a few runners to create a running enviro crew. And so you can find nonprofits that inspire you, but you also can go to your running group and be like, hey, anyone else trying to maybe make a little chapter of this group that's enviro related? Mm-hmm. That's something that I've been thinking about more and more. And it sort of happens naturally with a group I run with in Boulder, Rocky Mountain Runners, where people are just on it. We do trail work regularly and donate money to enviro groups. But, you know, I could get 3 of the most excited people in that group and meet regularly and do more in Boulder. And so that's one of my goals for 2020 is to create a little enviro running faction.
Yeah. No, that's a good explanation. Thank you. And, you know, you've given some good resources for people to go check out in your area. Now, what about for the people who are saying, okay, this all takes time, volunteering. I've got some money. I'm fine donating or purchasing things that will help or support people, but I just can't give my time. What are some other places people can, you know, you mentioned before, Protect Our Winters, Sunrise Project or Sunrise Movement?
Sunrise Movement. Yeah.
Those are 2. What are some other things people could donate to or give their support to?
For people who travel a lot, I encourage you to check out Protect Our Winters carbon calculator, and it can show you how much tons of carbon you're responsible for on trips, whether business or personal. And it includes things like whether you stayed in a hotel or you went camping, because that's a big difference footprint wise. And you'll see how disgustingly cheap it is to offset your travel. It's crazy how cheap it is. And a lot of these renewable energy credits, there's a big scale of them.
What does that mean? Like when you're saying about offsetting renewable credits? Energy
credits. So the idea, the concept is roughly you get on a plane and you're responsible for a small fraction of that flight, right? The carbon emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. And so by offsetting it, you're supporting a project that is mitigating that amount of carbon emissions. So these projects can range from anything from keeping a tree in the ground and not chopping it down, because that's value to keep that CO2 sequestered in the tree. So there's a lot of global offset programs that basically are just saying, okay, we're paying to keep this forest intact. To things in the US, like we're paying to subsidize this solar farm or a wind farm to keep these operations running. So it's sort of like this free market subsidy for carbon mitigation projects.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. And you said Protect Our Winters is probably the best place to go for that.
Yeah. It's really user friendly. It's appeals to athletes. I find it really easy to use. There's also the way I'm offsetting my carbon this year, which we talked about, Tina, adding up our flights, is through 1% for the planet. And that's more of a blanket donation. I give 1% of my income or more. And 1% for the planet divides donations based on a large range of organizations that are working to help our planet. So it's kind of like an economic portfolio for Earth, where I don't really want to go vet all these organizations and don't have the time. Who does? And so I feel confident giving them like a chunk of my money, and I'm learning about these organizations that are really important.
So that's what would the website be for that, or what do they type for that? 1% for the planet.
Yep, 1% for the planet. Yeah, ONE. I think for the planet. Yeah, 1%.
Okay.
You could just spell
the word or the symbol.
I'm pretty sure it's the word. You type it out.
Okay. All right. So going beyond that, I know you're looking it up. I'll give you a second, but what about vegetarian veganism? That definitely has kind of gained some more ground this year. I was shocked. I think it must have been after I spoke to you. I went to England, and in England, pretty much every restaurant you go to has a normal menu, and they have a vegan menu, which blew me away. It was like 10 items and things like that. So it's obviously, really starting to see a difference. We're seeing, KFC I saw is bringing out a vegan burger. Burger King already has the Impossible Burger. Are things like that actually helping? Is that for someone listening? I understand for many people listening, going vegan, going vegetarian is completely scary. And I haven't yet done it. I made a promise to my husband, Steve, that I would not go to become a vegetarian until I'd finished having children. So I have a few more months left. But so I get how scary it is. But like cutting down on meat eating, cutting down on things like that, like, is that actually, really going to make a difference? Having a meatless day a week, having a few meatless days a week?
Yeah, 100% it makes a difference. When you look globally, greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, which is mainly slashing down intact old growth forests, like in the Amazon, which is happening at an alarming rate. In order to have a field that you grow corn, soybeans or corn on, monocrops for cows to eat. So you're growing cow food, basically cattle food. And all those cows are the beef that we eat. So even though it's like death by 1,000 cuts, one less burger globally isn't going to save the world, but culturally, these types of shifts are so important. I feel very strongly that my diet is helping the earth. And I try not to be preachy about it. I don't like advertise my diet as like I'm a martyr, I actually find that my athletic performance, I definitely think is improved because I'm a vegetarian. And if anyone's listened, you might be rolling your eyes or shaking your head if you've seen Game Changers.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. That was the thing we watched last week, and I was like, after this pregnancy, Steve, I'm done. And so carry on. I saw that.
Yeah, and that movie had like some kind of ridiculous studies, but the bulk of the research is very clear that eating a low to no animal product diet is good for us, and it's good for the planet, and it's cheaper. It's unless you live in a food desert, it's easier in many ways. I think the myths around vegetarianism being this big scary thing are starting to die down. Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't see KFC and Burger King going this way if things weren't really starting to shift.
Right. It's so exciting. I'm like, yeah, eat that Beyond Burger.
So, two things related to that. One, Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger. There's always the other side of that. People saying the amount of processing that goes into that, like, is that really worth it? Yes. And to those of you listening, if you have not tried an Impossible Burger, you will not be able to tell the difference. Like it is shocking how much it tastes like beef. But is things like that, is it actually helping? Beyond Burger or Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger, is that good?
Yeah. Again, I'm not a agricultural expert, but the stats behind the impact that beef has on our planet are so crazy that it's almost impossible for a plant-based burger to get even close to having the same amount of emissions. Mm-hmm. Cows and cattle require so many resources, from land to water to the land that their food has to be grown on. And that's why things like the Amazon are being chopped down. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think it's kind of BS when people are like, oh, you had to grow the corn for the Impossible Burger. It's like, yeah, you had to grow 10 times as much corn to feed that cow.
Well, and I think one thing I want to mention is I remember, for many years and until a few years ago, I said, well, I eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And I know that this cow is in a field, surrounded by grass, and they're allowed to roam free. So that's good and that's fine. And yes, that probably is a better alternative, that you're not, giving money to these giant companies. But you also have to think about the fact that when you do really think about this, okay, your cow roaming free or your few cows in the field, how much more space does that require? So more, if everyone did that, we'd have to chop down even more land to fit the cows in some space to roam around in. So, and like we've kind of said, it doesn't have to be you go all the way or you go to vegan, like, especially I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, I don't know if you're vegan or not, but the jump from vegetarian to vegan seems especially scary. But it doesn't have to be that you go all the way immediately. You just, giving it a few days a week, making your enchiladas sweet potato and black bean instead of, chicken, or, trying out Shalane Flanagan and Elise Kopecky in their book. They have these chickpea burgers, like trying those out. So, there's many ways you can do this. It doesn't have to be so extreme of doing it 100%. So anything else you'd add there?
Yeah, completely. I guess I will add that we're talking about people who are living in cities or, a pretty standard lifestyle. And I just want to put the caveat that there are people on Earth and in America who still live off the land. And I just want to make a point that I'm not telling like people who live off of caribou or live off of meat that they've hunted sustainably for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that going vegetarian is the best way for them. I'm not really projecting this upon anyone. I think someone has to make that personal decision of what you want to put in your body and where it's coming from and where do you live and where is your food coming from? Like it's key.
Yeah. And again, go watch that Game Changers show. It is on program. It is on Netflix. And you even hear like Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about how, well, there's many people in there, but him in particular, he talks about, how he felt he had to have steak for lunch, steak for dinner, steak for breakfast, and eating meat all day long because that's like the manly thing that he have to do to build muscle. And we're told the same thing. You have to eat meat to build muscle. But he kind of has since realized like, actually, I was totally wrong. Like you don't have to have meat. And he said that he was feeling better after he kind of cut. I don't know did he cut out or cut down? I can't remember.
Oh, I think he's vegan.
Yeah. Okay. So he did. But like, just so for people listening, it's not, this isn't kind of a like hippy dippy thing. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger is, obviously known for his muscle definition and all that. And he was able to change as well. So, all right. So let's go a little bit smaller now. I wrote down a list of some things that maybe people can try to kind of, just make little changes, because the more little changes you make, the more you start to think about your actions and what you're doing. But I want to start with one in particular. We hear a lot about the US wastes 40%, I think it was, of food. But for people listening, starting with that one, why is wasting food bad? Because it decomposes. So why does that matter?
When you put food in the trash can, say you don't finish your dinner and you're throwing it away, it releases greenhouse gases because it's carbon decomposing. That's like in very broad scopes. And it's bad too, because we're consuming too much. Yeah. Like that is wasted energy. And the easiest way to cut down food waste is don't buy more food than you need, and be really thoughtful about what you're purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going on a trip, like don't get the bulk, whatever that is going to go bad while you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And ask I'm guessing the majority of people listening, and it's not your fault, don't have a composting system in your local town or community. But that's something, if food waste is your jam, that's something to really look into, because composting is hugely effective in reducing the emissions from food waste. I'm lucky enough that it gets picked up outside my door in Boulder, so I don't throw away any food waste. I compost all of it. And that was because some really like gung-ho smart people a while back in Boulder created a municipal compost system. And, you know, they lobbied the local city council to have it, and the infrastructure was created, and the compost is used on farms, I'm pretty sure, around town. So that's another opportunity for people to get involved and see what's happening. And I don't blame people, man. Like when I'm basically everywhere else I go, it seems like composting doesn't exist unless someone like does personal compost in your backyard, which is awesome. Like my dad does that with worms in his basement. He feeds his worms with all their food. But so that's great too. But the whole system is what needs to, you know, accommodate more of these sustainable practices. So it's worth a comment to your local government.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Let's go on to some more with that. So things like, and I'm going to give you this list. This is just ideas for people listening, and then you can add any more, or you can give caveats to some of these. Obviously, a big one that we all know, and I've seen people, you know, trying to remember, is reusable grocery bags. But a note with that, don't leave it in your house, leave it in your car. So it's there in your trunk when you're ready, when you need it. That's, I think, where people go wrong, is they have the good intentions, but, you know, just forget to take them. Leave them in your car. You can also get produce bags that you, rather than using those little plastic bags to put your fruit and vegetable in, you've got those. I've been using those for years, and they really, really make a massive difference when you start thinking about how many plastic bags you would use. Taking your own cup to Starbucks or a coffee shop, taking your own water bottle, and refusing to take, one-off plastic bottles. Not purchasing things like Happy New Year to 2020 that will be used for 12 hours and then never used again. And just, you know, that plastic's going to take 1,000 years to decompose from that. I said about waste, trying to like limit your waste, trying to think more carefully about your food. Limiting packaging, purchasing things without packaging. Although, Claire, I don't know if your Whole Foods has done this. I don't know what the heck is going on, but in our Whole Foods, all of a sudden, there's these plastic bags that cannot be recycled, and they're putting all the fruit and vegetables in it. And I just don't, I'm like, want to bang my head against the wall, why they're doing it now. But try and take a stand. Don't purchase those things in plastic. Or, I know actually England is way worse than the US in this, for putting like avocados in packaging or bananas in packaging or whatever. But try not to purchase things in packaging. Try to use your farmers markets instead of going to the grocery store as much as you possibly can. Thinking about the brands that you are supporting, what they represent, and if they are kind of taking steps to look after the environment. Saying no to race shirts and saying no to plastic bags. I know when we go in stores, people immediately, or in a restaurant, people immediately put it in a plastic bag if you want takeout. And actually, on that note, bring your own tubs for takeout. Leave them in your car so you can have those ready to go. Those are a few of mine. What else would you add, or what else would you say to those?
That's an amazing list. You can't preach it enough. Thank you, Tina. The next step of buying local produce is, if you have space or bins or in your yard, or space for pots, grow some of your own vegetables. I'm really looking forward to doing that this year. I'm finally not in a condo situation. And so I have like a little plot that I can put seeds in, and it's like one of the most exciting things of 2020 for me is to be able to grow my own spinach and, sunflowers and things like that. And
I think sunflowers.
Yeah.
Of all the things, sunflowers.
I just really want sunflowers. And I think the benefits of doing all the things you just said are so much broader than helping our planet, right? They're actually, a lot of them are really selfish. It's like the mental health that you get from slowing down and thinking about what you're consuming and where it comes from is huge. I just feel more in tune.
Although I would say, honestly, some of the mental health aspects and the other way, because I find myself getting so irrationally, like the Whole Foods bags, irrationally annoyed at things like, why are you doing this? It's 2020. Or like you come across a restaurant with a styrofoam cup and I'm like, why are you using styrofoam cups? Like, I want to go yell at the people working there. Not that that's going to do anything, but so I'd say my mental health in some ways is not as good. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Well, and knowing that like people working at a restaurant, it's probably not their decision or their fault. And knowing that we're all in it together I've tried to be less judgmental of my friends who aren't the most eco-conscious. And because I realize I'm not helping the world be a better place if I'm judging them or resenting them without having an actual conversation and saying, hey, like, what do you think about this? Are you concerned about climate change? What do you think about reusable grocery bags? What do you think about the next car you get, maybe getting a hybrid? I think those are the conversations we need to be having more than for all of our sanity.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, what about, we all are going to have family members. Maybe the people listening are those family members and hopefully are changing their mind throughout this episode. But what about family members who are adamant they don't want to, do any of this, like still go into the store and will get 13 plastic bags, which, by the way, they like to double bag. Another one of my favorite pet peeves. Mm. For every, put one tomato in a plastic bag, inside a plastic bag. Have you had any kind of insights since we last talked on how to have a productive conversation with those people? Is it, like you said, asking, what do you think about this? Rather than kind of like, hey, you know what that damage that's doing to the environment? Or, yeah.
Yeah. Meeting people where they're at is I think a good strategy. And that starts with asking questions versus spewing out facts, which we might know a lot of and be way more knowledgeable about the impacts of, say, plastic on our oceans and things like that. But that's not going to change someone's mind because who knows what's going on with them. Or say you catch someone on a bad day and it completely off-puts them to the idea of being an environmentalist because, maybe they just had a horrible day at work and they used 10 plastic bags at the grocery store and us, attacking people. And I'm not saying you're attacking anyone. I've been guilty of it.
I will admit I can be judgmental, and I'm sorry to anyone listening. Yeah. I know I can be judgmental about this stuff, so I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and instead just taking a step back and saying, hey, what do you think about using plastic bags? Have you ever considered using a canvas bag that you have in your house anyways? And see what they have to say. Maybe they've never thought of it, or maybe they genuinely forgot their bag that day, or maybe there's a deeper underlying issue. Usually, though, people probably just aren't thinking about this stuff. And that's why these conversations are really beautiful and productive, because it's how we change our culture is by having useful conversations where we learn from people. Mm-hmm. I have conservative family. And for example, I'm disturbed that some of them might, not be super in line with environmental issues because other issues are more important to them. And I found finding enviro issues in their area. So I have family in Minnesota that I'm like, I hope they're voting with the planet in mind because they're big outdoors people, big athletic family, young kids. I'm like, how can I meet them where they're at? And guess what? There's the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota, and there are these copper mines proposed on the border of the Boundary Waters, which is America's most visited wilderness area. And so I'm sending those family members some information on the Boundary Waters with some really cute stickers for the kids to put on their water bottles. And I know that sounds like more crap, but there's actually a point to it. And I don't know, I feel like there's hopefulness in moving, centimeter by centimeter with people if you're strategic about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to listen.
Yeah. No, I'm trying. I'm really working on my judgmentalness. That's something I really have been working on the last year or two, but I'm still working on it. All right. So for many of those people who we just mentioned, or, even just any of us, anyone listening, I don't know if you have seen this, but there's things that say, even if we cut our emissions to 0 tomorrow, the Earth is going to continue heating up for, quite a while. There's going to continue to be these effects for quite a while. So for those feeling like maybe it's family members, maybe it's the people listening, like this is hopeless. Is it even worth us trying? Like this is just too far beyond our reach. What would you say to them?
It's not hopeless. We actually have 10 years to figure this out. And even though there are going to be crazy, unavoidable consequences that will happen, guaranteed will happen. We already do have hundreds of thousands of climate change refugees, including at our border. So many people at the southern border of the US can be loosely classified as environmental migrants because, they can't make a living off the land they used to be able to due to climate change impacts. The global scale of what's going to happen isn't pretty, but it can be okay. Like I'm thinking, okay, what does 2100 look like? Or what does 2100 look like? Can 2100 look better than 2050? Mm-hmm. Can it look better than today? I really hope so, because we had a pretty gnarly year in climate change news. A lot of people don't necessarily connect, wildfires in California, flooding around the world, even war conflicts with climate change. Mm-hmm. And that's increasing. There's been crazy studies about the increase in conflict with climate impacts. My brother serves in the U.S. military, and he's impacted by that. Any military person or someone working overseas and really any line of work, that's really broad, but sticking to the conflict area, our world will become more dangerous.
Because like when people, and we could all think about it, when you're hot, you get irritated easier. And when you're irritated easier, that's, one of the things that can lead to more fights. That is. Yeah.
Well, and especially with food scarcity. So when food scarcity reaches a boiling point in places like sub-Saharan Africa, that is often a cause of conflict. And there's been some really interesting studies done that environmental impacts and consequences of climate change have increased violence in certain areas. So if you're really looking for one thing to get you involved on board, maybe that's it. You want to live in a more violent world.
Yeah. And then I just want to tell people, I don't know if you've seen this, I want to give people some resources or things, books to read, things to watch. You've mentioned before about some email newsletters you can join in. I want you to go over those. We mentioned Game Changers already. There's one with my love, Leonardo DiCaprio. I think it's called Before the Flood. Is that the name of it? Yes. I think that's the name of it. That one is worth watching. And then I actually watched Inside Bill's Brain, which is Bill Gates, and what he's been doing and working on. And it was actually fascinating. And I have to say, it gave me hope. For the first time in a while, I was like watching this, like, it did eventually get shut down in 2018 for reasons we've already spoken about. But he really has kind of been working on like an answer and a solution, and, thinking about people like him and some of the best minds in the world, like coming together to kind of be like, okay, we need to do something about this. Like that gives me hope. So that one's Inside Bill's Brain, is another good thing to watch about Bill Gates. I mentioned last time, Uninhabitable Earth is a good book. There's also one called The Water Will Come. The Water Will Come. think that's the name of the one. I will put links to everything in the show notes. What else for people to learn from?
Well, the first time we talked 6 months ago, you had just listened to Joe Rogan's interview with David.
Did you listen to that?
Yeah, and I finally listened to it, and I will echo what you said, that the information given in those 2 hours is just exceptional. Just because David Wallace Walls really knows his stuff, and
you hear Joe Rogan's like jaw hitting the floor like multiple times. Like it's kind of your reaction, but you hear another human being being like, "Are you serious?" Like, so yeah, definitely worth listening. So that one. Yeah. Anything else?
There are so many books and news outlets, and I would just ask yourself, how do you like to consume media? Is it through books? Is it through Twitter? Is it Instagram? Is it emails or podcasts? And then go in there, because where you're spending time consuming media, that's where you want to put informational outlets in. And that includes following your local reps, follow your senators on your preferred source of media, or get their newsletters, keeping that like everyday information flowing into us. And we're talking like real information, I don't think you're going to regret knowing more about these topics. That's what I suggest, adding those people, those outlets into your everyday consumption.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. I think we are wrapping up on this here. So just a bit about running. You had a very good year. Well, you had some ups, you had some downs, obviously, but tell us, it's been quite a while now, but winning Western States, now that you've had this time to reflect on it, like how big was that for you?
It was big. I can't really talk about Western States without talking about my quote taper. I was in northern Alaska 2 weeks prior, before Western States, on a trip learning about climate change and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is currently at risk of being drilled for oil. And I went into Western States just grateful to be on the starting line, because the trip was really heavy and kind of dangerous. And we were like mountaineering. I was with other Patagonia ambassadors, Tommy Codwell and Luke Nelson. And so when I showed up and, Olympic Village, 5 a.m., at the end of June, I was smiling, and the whole day was basically a smile until the end, when it got really, 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 really hard. But I'm grateful for my competitive side to have gotten me to the finish line in the time I did. But it's crazy, because that whole day was motivated by my love for this planet, my desire to expand what I know, and to highlight people like the Gwich'in in northern Alaska and share their story, their crazy plight right now. Climate change is an everyday issue for them. Their houses are falling into rivers left and right, and our government's not helping them in any way. Instead, they're threatening to drill in their backyard. So in many ways, it was like Western States is this beautiful, beautiful race. And the reason why I love our community, we come together at races, but definitely motivated by, I guess, a deeper desire to make sure people can run Western States in 50 years.
Mm-hmm. And you did use the platform of you, winning, celebrating, to continue to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was convenient timing, because there was a bill in the House of Reps that ended up passing to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It doesn't mean anything until the Senate passes that bill. So it's sort of in limbo right now. It's very much a threat. And I think running is amazing, and I want people to be able to run 100 years from now. Mm-hmm. And the way it currently stands, Western States probably won't happen in 2100 or 2100 unless we get our acts together. So encourage people to think about that on their runs, and think, maybe I can add in a little more enviro practice in my life and advocacy.
Yeah, thank you. And, from what you've kind of said, it didn't become a case of you won Western States and you kind of felt pressured to do this or that, because like you said, it was about so much more than just the race, even the winning it part. But what about like moving forward with races? Has this kind of changed your thinking of which races you want? Not necessarily Western States, but just kind of your life where it's at. What does 2020 look like for you? What is the focus here? You say you love to run and you love our planet. So does any part of you want to like make the most of it just in case it isn't there? How are you approaching your running?
Yeah, I'm trying to have balance with it. I realize I'm not Greta Thunberg and I can't sail across the ocean, or I guess I could try, but I'm not that badass. And so, like, for example, last year I didn't race in Europe once because the previous year I had raced like 4 or 5 times. So, and I felt really good about that decision. I won Western States and I didn't have to race in Europe. And I'm not planning on racing in Europe again this upcoming year. I'm really focused on doing as much work I can around 2020 elections and how I can combine running with that, whether it's like FKTs and attempts in...
Which is fastest known time.
Yeah, just big trail and ultra runnings. So I'm signed up for Western States again because I am really competitive. I like doing the hardest, most competitive races. I'm signed up for Lake Sonoma, which I've never done. That's in Northern California. And I'm excited about that race. It's a charity race. They do a lot with their local area, which is largely agricultural. And that's it so far. Mm-hmm. That's in April. So I'll be running as much as I can and training, but I also know that it's insane to think I could do like 2 100s a year. I'm never trying to do that. I don't think it's really that healthy for me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I want to show up ready and healthy to go on start line. So,
well, that's exciting. All right. And for those of you listening who, have been impacted, do want to do what you can, on Claire's Instagram, which you should already follow, there's lots of links on there to lots of bills that you could sign, not bills, petitions you could sign, things that you could be a part of, ideas. Yeah, many of them will be in the Colorado area, but many of them are not. So go follow her and click on some of those links. Go to the show notes to get yourself access to all the things that we've talked about or reminders of the things that we've talked about today. Claire, anything else you want to add before we finish up here, just to anyone listening?
No, thank you, Tina. Everyone, I hope you get out for a good run today or tomorrow.
That is good.
That's number one. We got to keep running, keep breathing, even if it's dirty air.
Yeah, that's the risk we take, I guess, as runners. All right, so it's Clare Gallagher Runs on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone, you can go follow Claire there. Anywhere else that you would send people?
Yeah, Instagram's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, Claire, thank you so much for your words, your wisdom, your inspiration. And I you've been a huge part of me continuing to take steps. So thank you so much for inspiring me and so many others.
Thank you, Tina. You're walking the talk. So I'm honored to have this conversation with you.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Kind of scary, but also hopefully it filled you with a little, hope that we can all do our part. We can all change. We can all try a little bit harder because, as I said at the beginning, even if technology somehow swoops in, it's never going to save the day if we can't change ourselves, if we can't stop using this planet the way that we do, kind of abusing it and just buying things for the sake of it, throwing things away all the time. We really have to kind of look into ourselves, and I hope that made you do that. I want to take an extra moment here to thank you. My friends, you're showing that you care. You're showing that you want to do better. You want to be better. You're thinking about the future. And I know you're the ones already doing the work. I know you're trying to be your best. And I just want to say I really appreciate you. So thank you. If you're listening to this on Friday, the day it comes out, this is the final day to enter the Michael Gervais giveaway. You can go to tinamuir.com/mastery. If you missed his episode a few weeks ago, go back and listen to it. One of my favorite episodes ever. I just, as you heard, love him so much because of what he stands for, about his brain and how it works. And he's just amazing. But anyway, he's giving away a $500 course of his for free to one of our listeners. So go to tinamuir.com/mastery. I will be randomly selecting the winner tonight. So if you're listening to this from Friday, you have today to enter only. I just want to take another quick moment to thank Recoup. They have their cryosphere and the cryo sleeve, which is kind of ice sleeve replacement. You can get 15% off by using code TinaMuir at recoupfitness.com. That's RECOUP fitness.com. You can find that link. You can find the Finding Mastery, the Compete to Create Michael Gervais giveaway link, all the links Claire and I talked about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 171. Now, next week, we have Alicia Montano on the show. We both have a very exciting announcement for you. And no, it's not that we're both pregnant. I think most people who follow us know that we are both pregnant. This is something really big. Subscribe and you will be sure to find out. We also talk about lots of other things that I think are going to be very interesting. So be sure to go listen to that one next week. Have a great week, my friends. Be kind to yourself and be kind to our home. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.